Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Buildertrend's newest series covering financials. My name is Reece Barnes. I am an additional training consultant. What that means to you is I sell our consulting services. That's going to be our onsite, our virtual, and our financial consulting, which is a new service that we are piloting. Basically, my role is to hear what our clients are struggling with, what they're needing help with, and help them determine if they need to do more unlimited customer support, or if it does make sense for them to outsource our consultants to help them implement Buildertrend, train their team, and create systems. I'm here with my co-host, Zach Wojtowicz. Zach,
Hey Reese, how we doing today?
you have quite the radio voice.
Hey, thanks. Face for radio, as the kids say.
Hey,
So, yeah. Anyway, so Reese is a good friend of mine, and we've had a lot of conversations recently about ways that we can help people use Buildertrend to the fullest capacity. And we thought, wouldn't it be a great opportunity for us to talk about financials to the masses? You know, a lot of people may have thought about these things, or they're curious about dipping their toes in the water. And as my experience as an on-site consultant, I've traveled around the country and I've had these conversations with dozens and dozens of builders. So we have a lot of experiences we can draw back on, things that have worked, things that don't work, and really get into the heart of what makes a Buildertrend user get the most out of the system.
the other reason why we're doing a whole series just on financials is a couple of reasons. A, in Buildertrend, it's a very strategic and system reliant portion of the program. The second, in my opinion, most important, we're dealing with our clients' financials, the most important part of their business. So we want to make sure that we provide content so you can fully understand from soup to nuts what are cost codes, why are we using them, how to utilize cost codes, how do we do a Buildertrend QuickBooks or Xero integration, how do we receive payments, how do we handle job costing and reporting, which is ultimately going to be the 6 different segments that we have here on the financial series. But first, what are we talking about today? Ultimately, we want, again, to dive into the fundamentals of cost codes. We want you to have the concepts and characteristics of organizing your financial system using cost codes. We want to make sure that you understand the best practices and strategies for utilizing them, as well as how do we provide an easy to adopt outline so that you can start to tackle this topic and ultimately make sure it's done right.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of information. There's no way around it as far as discussing these things. So we really wanted to try and figure out what are the easiest ways to get started, and what should you really be thinking about when it comes to how we structure this information and make it usable for everybody. So we're going to talk about the basics and kind of dive deep into what operational changes can you make, what should you make, and really understand what is a cost code when it comes down to it.
And when you say operations, I thought cost codes were more accounting. I could be
Right.
wrong.
Absolutely. And that's a very common battle that you kind of have to start, where who owns the entirety of this cost code discussion? Who is
An
really in
accountant.
Hey, whoa there. All
Hey,
right.
hey, hey, whoa,
Get a little aggressive.
easy.
Yeah, can it be the accountant? Absolutely. There's no doubt they're going to have an input, or should have an input, on what those cost codes should look like, right? They're the ones who are ultimately paying the bills and making sure things are kind of moving along at the back end of the project and that you're receiving money, so on and so forth. But it's not just them. It can be a lot of different parties and a lot of different groups, and focusing in on that.
Who?
So, well, it gets a little complicated, right? Like,
Okay.
where do you derive your information from when you're setting up a project? How do you actually go about and tell a customer, hey, what do I actually want to charge you? What do I charge you for when I'm going and through the sales process? And how do I make sure that I'm hitting my targets and my numbers? So there's no denying that your production team, your estimator, your sales guy, depending on who is actually the person who gets the proposal in place, they should be thought about as well, about how those things should be put in place in the program.
Would it be safe to say that like an estimator or production team maybe is using cost codes more than the accountant? Actually, the reason I say that is because I'm thinking from an estimator standpoint, let's say we're working with a little bit bigger company. All they do all day long is put estimates together. They're digging through cost codes. They're setting everything up with line items and making sure that it's getting released to the client or the prospect, whatever portion of the phase you're in. How does that really make sense to an estimator or to a production or to the accountant, and who is really going to be involved?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when people are developing these codes, a lot of times they are doing what they've done because it's worked. So they might have a company that's 30 years old and they have
Okay.
an Excel sheet that they've been using, and it's just part of their culture. This is entrenched in what they do.
Okay.
So with an estimator who kind of dictates what's happening, ultimately that's okay, as long as they've had a conversation with the accountant to say, here's how I want to track the back end reporting that goes along with that information. So what does that person need to make sure the company is profitable and solvent and able to really be you know, long-standing healthy, versus what does the estimator need in order to make sure that customers can understand what they're paying for, outlining their
Got
budget,
it.
and making sure that they are staying on budget
Sure.
using cost codes. It all starts from beginning to end. So that structure is really the backbone of how everything is going to move from A to Z in Buildertrend, and really inside your language as a company, right? When you are
Yes.
discussing these items with each other, you're gonna have to understand that you're discussing the same thing in order to be as efficient as possible.
So you mentioned items, and were you referencing cost codes, or there
Yes, right.
what? Okay, so does
We're kind
everyone
of
call
we're
them
kind of
cost
putting the
codes?
cart in front of the horse here, as far as
I'm sorry, I tend to do that.
it's all right. It's all right. I got it. That's why they gave you me, so we can rein it back a little bit. Make sure
Exactly.
that the
You're the
people out
scholar
there,
in the
yes,
library,
yes, the Buildertrend the help center. It's just a closet
the
in the
archive.
facilities. Yeah, they bring me out every once in a while to
Dust you
talk a
off.
little bit. Yep, like a good book just gets better
Yes.
with time. That's
Yes.
how the expression goes. So what are cost codes is kind of the main thing, and they have a lot of different names. So some companies refer to them as service items. QuickBooks calls them products and services or items. Other people
Okay.
call them expenses. At the end of the day, it's the categories of budgetary items that you want to track and make sure that you are ultimately able to tell if you overspent or underspent within your job. Okay.
It's like a
So,
category.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Take an example when you were creating a personal budget, Reece, if you were trying to
Don't have
figure
one of
out,
those.
well,
Probably should.
yeah, it's time to be an adult and put one together, my friend. If you were going to do that, if I were going to sit you down as a life coach and tell you, hey, we need to get your budget together, what do you think we would try and track in order to make sure that you were making money in your day-to-day life, right? So that you're not accidentally overspending in categories that you could be controlling. We would look at
Sure.
things like
Okay.
what would we keep track of for a person?
I mean, I'm off the top of my head. I'm thinking utilities,
Yep. Okay.
groceries, rent, mortgage,
Yep.
car payment,
Car
insurance
payment,
is going to be in there.
insurance. Yep.
Let's say you got a dog. They need fed every month.
Pet. Yep.
We could go down the line.
This is adding up pretty quick. You have a
Yeah.
little more. So
I know.
maybe it sounds like you need that budget sooner
I need
than
a big list of cost codes.
yeah. Well, what about this? So if you were saying to yourself, I want to make a personal budget, and I really enjoy burritos.
Love them.
Do I need a line item in my budget for every type of food that I purchase? Or is it more realistic to say I have a restaurant budget for $300 this month,
Ladder.
right? You
Yep.
want to make it so that you're looking a level up so that you're able to stay on track. Who cares what you actually ate? It doesn't matter,
Right.
right? Whether
I could barely remember half the time. Give me
right.
24 hours and I forgot.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, building a construction budget isn't that different from a personal budget when it
Less
comes to
burritos, unless you're big on culture. Friday burritos sounds like a good idea. Might want to build that into a cost code. Maybe not. I'm
absolutely.
sorry. Keep going.
And that's
Sorry.
okay. That's okay. That's a great point, because there are times where you might want to specify the details of what you're spending. But how you actually get that information is just as important. So, you know, we have a lot of ways in a construction situation where you can track that information, but does that mean that you need a whole cost code for it? What's wrong with descriptions,
Sure.
right? What's wrong with memos? There are tons of ways to get the detail without needing like an overly itemized list to see kind of what I'm spending my company budget on, right?
Sure. And to kind of bring it back, the idea is to give you an idea or a way to categorize where you're spending your money. So at the end of the year, when I look at my savings account, I'm like, I didn't hit the goal.
Right.
Where can I trim up next year?
And
How can I
even
be better
further,
at this?
when you look at it from a month standpoint, right?
Okay.
How did I do this month? Like you're not looking at your budget
Baby steps.
once a year. You're looking at
Right.
it every day and
Okay.
keeping track of those
That
things.
makes sense.
Again, we're trying to get you to be a responsible adult, man. We got a lot of work to do.
I know.
So a project manager hopefully isn't looking at his budget every 2-3 months. He's looking at it daily, and having a good cost code list makes that report readable. It makes it so it's not a burden, but it's something that I can really look at briefly and pull away to make sure everything's looking right. And if there's not a problem, or if there is a problem, I'm able to address it much more quickly by dialing down, because I have that natural report that is going to be easy to read versus something that's just like overly complicated and long, and you're, subconsciously you're just going to balk at.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So when we have the concept of the cost code.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need them to use Buildertrend?
Great
What if,
question.
let's say I don't have any. Let's start from there. Let's say we've just been operating in Excel, tracking just mass like transactions, receipts, and doing
Yep.
that. Why do I need cost codes in Buildertrend?
Well, hopefully they save you time. So, in a situation where right now, if you're just logging all your expenses into an Excel sheet, you're already kind of putting them into a bucket, into a category. Well,
Sure.
having a budget in place in the system makes it so you're kind of doing some of the work up front, and then you're just kind of placing the item into the correct bucket at that point.
Sure.
Now, you asked the question, and I want to go back to that because it's really important and something that we do get asked pretty frequently, which is, do I need cost codes? And I would argue that this is a non-negotiable. This is something that, yes, absolutely. Not only, should I be using them, but why aren't I already using them? And in many instances, that's where we start. What are you doing right now? What are the things that are happening in my day to day that I can take and turn into cost codes? Because I guarantee you, most of the listeners out there have a way for them to track their job information, but
Sure.
getting it into Buildertrend is the main goal. But there are good ways to do that, and there are bad ways to do that. And sometimes I kind of think of myself as like damage control.
Okay.
I'm inheriting an account, I'm helping them get better, and I'm looking at what they've been doing, and I'm shaking my head thinking, this is not going to work. We're gonna have to make some changes, and that can be a really hard conversation to have, no doubt. But the end goal is we want to try and make the system be as efficient, but also as user friendly as possible for all the users in the program. And just going back to that theme that, what works for one estimator isn't necessarily what should be the expectation for everybody else in the company. And so you want to look
Sure.
at what you're doing, start with that, and then get input to make sure that everybody has a voice and see what that looks like.
Love it. Let's kind of carry on that, because ultimately cost codes, you know what they are, non-negotiable, have to use them. Let's go over more so what are good cost codes, what are bad cost codes, and where do we help clients, or at least push them into getting a cost code set that works for them? How do we ultimately dictate that?
Right. And we want to look for certain characteristics that are going to be repeatable and be very, very thought out before you really execute it within the program. I mean, it's kind of funny that this is episode 1, because we're not necessarily inheriting or working with an account that is in the early stages of their Buildertrend use, right?
Sure.
They could be using 5 years and still not have a good cost code set, but they've been using those cost codes in the account. And so how do you detangle that information and make sure that you're able to make it a little bit, maintain what you've been doing, but also evolve and really kind of become better within the system itself. So when we talk about cost codes, the first place where we start is like, what's happening right now in the system, okay?
Okay.
And how can we really think about the long-term effects if we were to change these things? So there are times where you're kind of stuck with what you have, um, but that's just for now. We can always rename, reorganize within the system with the understanding that other projects are going to be better as a result. So bad cost code lists are just poorly disorganized, very disorganized, poorly thought out, only works for one person.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
other
but
thing,
what does disorganized mean? I mean, when I think of cost codes, I'm thinking of 4 digits, numerically ordered, and I'm
well, see,
thinking,
that would be good. A lot of
okay,
people don't have that. A lot of people's cost codes are an alphabetized list of everything that they
like
charge to
bucket.
a customer. Yeah.
Okay,
And at that point, it's not even a bucket. It's just like, hey, here is a list of stuff that has no rhyme or reason to why it's in the account or not. They added
gotcha,
one time and they never used it again. Why? They really just
gotcha.
kind of, yeah, and like they
That's
don't have a numbering system. They don't have it in the order of construction. They really don't have any reason for those cost codes to be there. They just think, okay, this is how I've always done it, and so that's how I'm going to continue to do it. I've adopted to this new software, but I'm either unaware that I need to change how I do things, or they're unwilling and not really open to changing the way that they're doing their day-to-day operations. But I always think of adopting a new software as like an opportunity
sure,
to really evaluate how you're doing things right now.
sure. Well, and that's kind of the idea. I mean, Buildertrend is it's not a small program. It's very
Right.
robust. A lot of you can manipulate it like crazy. You can make it work for your business. You can utilize different features different ways. So ultimately, with the cost codes, is that's opening up the opportunity to really utilize purchase orders, invoicing, estimates, and making budgets.
Don't give them too much. We want people to come back for episode
Okay.
2. You
Okay.
don't want
Okay.
to
Okay.
like.
I'm running here. I'm trying to figure out what I'm really trying to hammer home and make it as easy as possible for the listener. What's bad cost codes, what's good cost codes. We've identified the good cost codes. They're numerically numbered. There's a reason to them. They're very methodical, company-wide, understanding who's going to be using them, why they're going to be using them, and that's an effective way. So what else do you see that are bad? What else do you see that's good?
Well, as far as bad, there's a lot of things that you want to avoid when it comes to just setting up the cost code. And we kind of touched on this, but it's worth repeating. Let's take an example like your appliance cost code,
Okay.
right? A lot of people will, rightfully so, assume, all right, I want to track all the expenses that go into the appliances, and they're tempted to have a range cost code and a microwave cost code and a dishwasher
The
cost code.
burritos.
Yes, right? The details, the
Okay.
things that overly specify. You
Okay.
don't really care as far as all those individual items being there. You want to have one thing that says appliances, and this is how much I want to spend for it. And most listeners are probably, yeah, that's what I do. I just have an appliance cost code. But that's not the case on a lot of different things within the program. Sometimes people will have 5 cost codes, 10 cost code for permits. Why? What are you gaining by having all those different permit codes? Why wouldn't you have one single cost code for permits and then use descriptions to actually go through it? Now, are there times that it makes sense to? Sure. And obviously we're kind of operating on the framework of everybody's going to be different. All customer needs are different, and we
That's worth
understand
the
that.
evaluation, right?
Right. Exactly. Think about it. Go
Sure.
through every item and look for those redundancies. You see that a lot with different types of lumber usages. Okay. Do you
A
need,
2x4 cost code,
yeah,
4x4.
exactly. Why not just have framing material, lumber material, right? Framing labor. Those categories give you enough information to know, here's what I want to spend and here's what I actually spent. And little details like the vendor gives you an invoice that outlines all the little things that you purchased down to the nail. Tracking those things aren't going to really benefit you in the long term, right? In fact, sometimes those
Sure.
will create more work in order for you to really track down where things are happening. So when we're looking at codes, we really want to pay attention to how detailed are they really, and ask that question: is it really necessary? And I would challenge anybody to go through and look at your cost codes today and think, do I actually need that? Do I ever use this? Every
Sure.
code has a purpose. Every code is used on every job. And if it's not, then you really are not really gaining anything from it. It is
Well,
just
and you're kind
not
of
good.
hurting your team, right? Because
Right.
like if I'm an estimator and I've got 500 cost codes to dig or search through, and I have to memorize those either 4-digit numbers or however we have it going. I mean, you have here, if you're watching the webisode as opposed to listening, we have a note here that a good set of cost codes is going to be ideally no more than 150. So when we are structuring these, again, the idea is that we're using every single one. They all make sense. They're not too granular. They're going to get us the information that we need. But as far as the actual structure itself, to me, it would make sense to go cost code 1,000 appliances, alphabetical order. Is that how would you recommend structuring your thousands, 2,000s, 3,000, your 2020s, your 2030s? How would you recommend setting all that up?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would not put appliances at the top. So
Okay.
let's just
Hey,
start there.
I'm a sales guy, right?
Yeah, right. So a lot of times, think of it from a logic standpoint. Think about the order of construction. How do you build a house? Wouldn't it be nice to have a report that
That makes sense.
that was in the order of how I actually built the house and
So
built
like
the
permitting.
project? Exactly. So you would start with your excavation, your permit, and utilities. Those are generally things we see at the top. Then we move
Okay.
into your framing, your mechanicals, right?
Plumbing.
Then you're getting into the roofing, and then you're getting into the exterior versus interior codes, and then finish work, and then close out, punch list, anything like that. Those would be how you would want to structure it. Now the numerical system that goes with it is just a way to keep things in place, because I might want my roofing codes to all be together, but if I just rely on trusses and shingles, well, they might not be next to each other in the alphabet. And so when I'm going to enter the data into the system, it makes it really hard to have those groupings together. So by putting a numerical system to it, you're really able to ensure that things are in their proper place from a usage standpoint, so that it's easy for me to access and go through and make things work for the team. And I love that you brought up like having too many codes. You have to consider that when you are talking about the day-to-day operations of the system. The more data you put into it, the more cumbersome it is for the team to buy in. Now they're having to relearn all this other data
It's just a
entry.
pain.
It's a pain. It is. It's just more options usually leads to more confusion and more
Gotcha.
room for mistakes, when we're coding things together.
Gotcha. Good cost codes, numerically driven. We've got a reason feels similar to our actual production, and it's a team buy-in. It's a team understanding who's going to be using them.
Right. And ultimately, I mentioned this earlier, but getting everybody to speak the same language. Like I worked with a builder, and this was a worst case scenario. And I fear that this is more common than I think, and I'm not trying to put anybody on notice, if you're on the radio, like it's gonna be okay.
Blast
But
by Zach
if
Wojtowicz.
your cost codes are a different set than what your accounting team is using, you're really setting yourself up for miscommunication all over the place. This company would write an estimate, and then they would hand it off to the accounting team, the accounting department, and they would reinterpret where they thought it should go within the accounting record.
They broke rule one.
Absolutely.
You got to have everyone on board. You have to know who's doing what and why they're doing it.
Right. And you think about where that comes from. I've gotten the sense in a lot of my construction visits that the accounting leadership and the production leadership and the sales leadership aren't always in the same room having the conversation and hashing out the details of how this works.
Sure.
And so you need everybody who's a stakeholder in the company, the people who are involved in managing your folks who are doing their jobs, to set the standard, the expectation that we're all using the same set. And this is a lot of what I do as a consultant. And what consultants do is iron out those wrinkles and try to point out the variables of why the accounting team might have a problem with how the production team does things and vice versa, and really drive home that if we can get you guys talking in the same language, that you're going to avoid a lot of the confusion of what's happening between the field and the office.
Did I catch you saying folks?
Yeah, it
Folks?
was,
Oh,
yeah.
we're just from Omaha,
Omaha,
Nebraska.
yeah, our Nebraska
Oh,
sensibility is like, howdy,
watch.
folks.
How are your folks doing today?
Yeah, howdy, y'all. Oh, wrong. That's our Texas friends. I went
We
full.
love Texas.
Yeah.
I'm from Texas.
So we've covered a lot, and ultimately keep in mind that you have other people that you can reach out to at Buildertrend to help support you through this process. And
Unlimited customer support. Use
reach
it.
out
Call
to
us.
our help center, reach out on chat, set up a meeting with your account rep, and ask about how do my cost codes look, right? From the people who talk about this every day. Get a second pair of eyes on it. And we'll give you an honest assessment of, you're in good shape. You don't need to adjust this. It works for you. Or we look at your account and you're using
It's going to be a
codes
problem.
and codes and codes. It's disorganized. Your budgets don't make sense. Everything's out of whack. You have to rely on the experts who talk to not just your company, but hundreds of companies on the daily
All day.
about this very topic. I mean, how often are you talking about cost codes with your customers right now, even in the sales process, Reece?
Well, and that is such a huge factor for our clients is getting the consulting help that they need, because financials, again, there's a lot of strategy to it, a lot of understanding, connecting a lot of different hands. I hear it daily. Costco. That's when I'm auditing accounts before my calls. I'll go and I'll check A, if they have cost codes, B, what do they look like, and then I'll flow over into financials, see how they're utilizing them. There's so much involved in this process. That's why we're teeing off this entire series with
Right.
the fundamentals of cost codes, because without the fundamentals, and if let's say I got Buildertrend because I wanted to use estimates. Okay, well then we need to get cost codes that are solid so that you can start using estimates. Well, I never used cost codes. Why do I need cost codes? If you don't have cost codes, you're not going to be using estimates to its fullest ability. That's such an important piece. So to answer your question, I hear it every single day, and I'm not even a subject matter expert. But it's just one of those things where it's such an easy concept. It's fundamental. It's rudimentary. And if we can get that ingrained from the very beginning, you guys are going to have a great opportunity in Buildertrend by utilizing the financial suite appropriately from the beginning, ideally. If not, we have the resources in the team that can help you kind of backpedal here. Really, the only thing we need from you guys is the focus and the really the attention to want to do it.
Right.
But ultimately, let's kind of wrap this up here. Zach, do you want to kind of go through the kind of the big high level of what they need to take away from this?
Yeah. So, we have just some tips that we like to advise people on how they actually need to get started with this. Look at what you're already using, curate that list, go through it, and try and condense it as much as possible. Eliminate things that are unnecessary and point out things that maybe you do want more detail in, that you're lacking the reporting that you're looking for. Add that numbering system to give it a structure. My recommendation is use 4 digits, because then you have spacing. So if I have 1010 utilities, 1020 permits, well, maybe I want to insert a cost code 5 years from now in between those codes, because I'd like to adjust my reporting abilities. You'll
Love that.
have the breathing room. You'll
That's a
be
huge tip.
able, yeah, it's super important.
That's huge.
Think about the future proofing of those lists. Or maybe you're going to hire a new estimator someday. You want to make it so that they can put their spin on things and then give their advice on how they estimate and make things better for your company. Consider how you build a house and organize your cost codes around that concept, that logical way that you would work through a report. Look at these outside the system first, put them into Excel, write them down on paper, a whiteboard, it doesn't matter. Get it outside of Buildertrend on paper, and then seek us out to get a second look at it. And then we'll get it into the system for you so that you're on your way to having a more successful Buildertrend journey.
Love it. God, Zach, you're so insightful. You're just a wealth of knowledge, you scholar.
Why do you think I'm here?
Yeah, you're here to carry the folks like me. You bring everything full circle, Zach. You do.
Appreciate it, brother.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, guys, hopefully you found this today useful as far as, the tips and advice that were pointed out. But what do we got next time in episode 2?
Oh, next time, episode 2, it is going to be utilizing cost codes. We'll go ahead and get that shot when we're ready to go, and tune in next time to hear how do we take the fundamentals to the next step, put it into practice, and start making your guys' business better. Until then, we appreciate your time. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, whichever platform medium you chose. Again, my name is Reece Barnes. I'm an additional training consultant here at Buildertrend. Zach?
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you.